This is a moment in Jewish history. Operation Wings of Eagles, also known as Operation Magic Carpet, brought thousands of Jews from Yemen to Israel. The Jewish community of Yemen was one of the oldest and largest in the world. Located on the edge of what is now called the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, many famous rabbis came from Yemen, such as Rabbi Shalom Shabazi, who was born in the 1600s. His songs and poems are still recited today. Rabbi Shalom Sharabi was born in Yemen in the 1700s and became a renowned educator who founded the famous Beit El Yeshiva in Jerusalem. Their long history was quickly coming to an end, with the anti-Jewish riots taking place in the late 1940s. After the United Nations vote on Israel in 1947, riots took place in Yemen as well as other Middle Eastern countries, and many Yemenite Jews were killed. In 1948, after Israel became an independent country, riots continued, and Jewish leaders were falsely accused and imprisoned. Many Yemenite Jews had moved to Israel over the years, and in fact, one of the first political parties elected in the new Israeli Knesset was the Yemenite Association, which had its roots back several decades. But for most of the Jewish community, it was illegal for them to leave the country, and political turmoil and disease made leaving an even more pressing issue. So the Jews began to flee, on foot, through the desert, and made their way to Aden, a British protectorate on the coast where they were housed in refugee camps. The first airlift took place in 1949. This was just 4 years after the Holocaust, and during a lull in the War of Independence, which was taking place between Israel and her neighbors. The airlifts to bring Yemenite Jews to Israel were in the beginning secret and funded through charity from Jewish communities around the world, specifically the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. It was called Mivtza al-Kanfei Nesharim, or Operation Wings of Eagles, based on a verse from Exodus chapter 19. In English, it was called Operation Magic Carpet. An American Jewish reporter joined one of the early airlifts and wrote the first article revealing the mission to the public. Her name was Ruth Gruber, and she had previously written about Jewish refugees from war-torn Europe. The following is from her article from the New York Herald Tribune. Operation Magic Carpet, the airlift which the American Joint Distribution Committee is conducting to bring Jewish Yemenite refugees to Israel from Aden, completed the first phase of its operation this week, when the last of 4,500 women, children, and elderly men landed at Lida Airport. Another 850 Jews of military age are still detained in Aden camps under British orders. In an exodus not unlike that from Egypt 3,000 years ago, between 40,000 and 50,000 Jews of Yemen have all been pouring into the Jewish protectorate of Aden, and from there are being flown to Israel on an all-American airlift. Giant silver-winged American-built C-54 Skymasters, flown by American pilots, some wearing cowboy boots from Texas, have been flying 1,600 miles non-stop from Aden to Israel, transporting Yemenite Jews wearing long robes, silver-fringed hoods, prayer shawls, and love locks, looking like people of the Bible. The following are excerpts from Gruber's autobiography about the experience. For years, any Yemenite Jew caught trying to leave Yemen was sentenced to death. Then, in 1949, the chief imam of Yemen made a startling announcement. All Yemenite Jews could leave if they paid a ransom for each human being, including newborn babies, if they abandoned all their belongings, and if they paid a tax on their treasured Torah scrolls. Often barefoot, the people fled down the mountains and crossed the scorching desert until they reached Aden. From Israel, I flew to Aden to cover the Yemenite Magic Carpet operation. At the Aden airport, an American working for the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee greeted me warmly, stowed my bag, camera, and typewriter in his car, and drove to the Hashid camp, where earlier refugees waited to be flown to Israel. His warmth changed to disbelief when I told him, I want to go to the land of the Sultan. I understand it's the last stop along their journey where they pay the ransoms. You're mad to go, he warned me. Not one of us working here has gone there. 2 years ago, they killed 30 Jews. It was a pogrom. They might kill you." "I'll be careful," I said as we reached the camp. Dozens of people were milling around, the men in long white gowns and round white caps, the women in slim cotton pants beneath their cotton dresses. Many wore headscarves. Other wore caps trimmed with a fringe. With the help of an interpreter, Suleiman Musa Tanami, a tall tailor from Lidan, told me his story. "My wife and our 6-month-old baby," he explained, "we walked from our home for 14 days to Sana'a. We were with 30 others. We felt traveling with a group would help protect us against people who might rob and kill us." He watched with interest while I scribbled his words. Then he went on. "When we reached Sana'a, we waited for another 2 weeks for more people. Then from Sana'a, we began another 8-day journey by foot through the mountains of Sayani. And from there we crossed the Yemen border to Aden. Their lives as Jews were marked by poverty and oppression. Many could neither work nor own land, yet they were the artisans and craftspeople of Yemen, who had clung to their faith for over 2,000 years. Operation Magic Carpet continued until 1950. The pilots who took part were from Alaska Airlines, at the time headed by James Wooten. He directed almost 430 flights over dangerous airspace. He was later honored by the States of Israel. One of the pilots was Warren Metzger. His daughter, Dara Metzger, spoke to Toldot Yisrael about her father's experiences.
Marshall Fields III and Eddie Warburg, who was co-chairman, president of the JDC, approached Wooten again and said, "Look, we have this emergency situation. Can Alaska Airlines do it?" So he said, "Not a problem. We'll make this happen." He was kind of a magician, logistically. He had planes and pilots all over the world doing various charters and airlifts and everything. So they contracted for 2 C-46s and 2 DC-4s to go over there and get the kids out and get them to Tel Aviv. And of course, the entire route, they were flying over Muslim territory and over war zones. There was active shooting going on. There was anti-aircraft stuff left over from World War II. It was a very dangerous mission. Not that Wooten actually said that to the pilots, but they all figured, they were old World War II vets, they figured it out pretty fast. And Dad was asked at the end of 1948 if he would go over there and fly, and he said yes, of course. And he was made at that point a captain of the C-46. The pilots basically ended up having to be stationed in Asmara, Eritrea, because, no one was trying to kill anybody there. And they would take off from there, they would fly to Aden, where Alaska Airlines established a fuel dump, refuel the planes, get the people on board, fly to Tel Aviv, and then they had to fly to Cyprus to get more fuel, and then back to Asmara. And Wooten, being Wooten, he considered the weight limits of the planes more just guidelines. So in order to be able to pack as many people on board as possible, he'd basically only let the pilots fuel to about half. So they were flying on pretty low tanks. Dad minimized the danger, but he told me later, that there were a couple times I came into Tel Aviv on fumes. Every pilot that I heard from, everybody I talked to said the same thing. It was, you couldn't stay dispassionate about it. You couldn't. Even though 99% of the pilots were not Jewish at all. The information about what had happened during World War II had come out. There was a huge feeling of never again. This is not happening again.
Another one of the pilots was Elgen Long. The following is from a Toldot Yisrael interview.
When we got to Aden, the commanding officer told the captain, I was standing there as well as the mechanic was standing there, and he told the captain that we had some Jewish refugees that were in dire straits and needed to get to Israel as rapidly as possible. And the captain asking how many he had, and he said about 2,000, but more are arriving every day. But the problem is they're arriving here, some of them are sick, they have malaria, I mean, they're in bad shape, they haven't eaten properly in a month, maybe some of them. They were worn out, there were children, they couldn't take care of them, and they were living on the desert, and they got some tents for them, and that's all they could do, but in the hot desert sun, Down there on the coast, they didn't have enough water, and the military couldn't help them. They had to get them out and to get them to Israel. Some of them were dying every day. He asked, how many can you take? And they said, well, we have 48 seats, but children under 2 could sit in their parents' laps. Is that all you can carry? Yes, and it would take us a day or 2 to make each trip. Well, they're coming in faster than that. And the mechanic said, well, maybe we could take more if we took out the seats. Captain Curry said, well, how much do they weigh? And how much is their luggage? And he said, well, they don't have any luggage. They may have a Bible with them, their Torah with them, but that'd be about all. And some of them are half-dressed, and they're desolate. They probably maybe weigh about 80 pounds each, and a lot of them are children. Well, we can carry 12,000 pounds and take off out of here in the morning. The commanding officer had 150 Yemenites there ready to get on the airplane. They didn't want to go because it was Sabbath. It happened to be a Saturday. And the rabbi explained to them that they'd gotten permission from the head rabbi that in Tel Aviv that it was a matter of life and death, go for it. And then they didn't know about this airplane. And then he remembered Exodus, and he reminded them, it's prophesied you're going to return on the wings of an eagle. Get on the eagle. We were just doing our job. I didn't know anything about Exodus, that it was prophesied that this would happen. But these people knew it. They knew their Torahs. Most of them knew most of it by heart. When the rabbi reminded them, this was a prophecy that this is how they would return to Israel, on the wings of an eagle.
10 years after Operation Magic Carpet ended, a mass celebration took place. The following is from an article from the Jewish Telegraphic Agency from April 28, 1959. Bearded sages wearing ancient robes mingled with sturdy open-shirt youths and girls clad in gay dance costumes as Israel last night celebrated here the 10th anniversary of Operation Magic Carpet, through which the Jewish population of Yemen was flown to Israel in 1949. It was one of the most colorful assemblies ever held here. Government officials joined members of Israel's Yemenite community in celebration. In later years, many of the pilots who took part in the operation were honored by the State of Israel, and they noted the many children and grandchildren of those refugees who were rescued now living there.
Somebody pointed out that there's a belief in Judaism to save a life is worth 1,000 lives, or something to that effect. And to think that we saved almost 2,000 lives, 1,800 lives, and now there's 750,000 descendants, kind of blows you away in every regard, especially if you're my age.
This has been a moment in Jewish history. For questions or comments and past shows, you can visit benbresky.substack.com or email me at bbresky@gmail.com. Thank you to all the listeners, and shalom.